Jeff is the name. West Side Jeff sitting in for Chris Crock here in News Talk 820 WBAP. Chris was in earlier today, sitting in for Casey while Casey's off on a long weekend vacation, or some opportunity to spend some good quality time with his wife, Carrie Underwood. Maybe he's out on tour with Carrie. I don't know. He keeps saying that's his wife or wife to be. Hell, I don't know. Lucky him. I like to think of it as a stalker is what I'd call it. But Westside Jeff in for Chris Crock. I'm in tonight, Monday night and Tuesday night, talking about the big story going on. That is obviously with what's going on with Joe Biden. I'll tell you, Joe Biden was out on the trail today. Tonight, Lori just talked about he's in Michigan. I'll come back in about 3 minutes and tell you why that's impactful, because he's got 3 constituencies. He's doing more visible events than he's done forever. Yeah, they're all scripted. Yes, they're all well thought out. Yes, they're all planned out. But if you didn't know better by watching, he looks pretty good. I'll tell you about that in 3 minutes. But first, we're talking about a personal story for me, and that is my buddy Earl. He's a couple years younger than me. At age 58, he was diagnosed with, his son said he was diagnosed and confirmed with Alzheimer's. Karen wrote in earlier, you can hit me up across social media, by the way, at Westside Jeff on Facebook, on X, and on Instagram. Karen shot me a note, said, hey, you can't necessarily be diagnosed with Alzheimer's. It's done afterwards with brain scans, autopsies, and so on. I'm not a clinician, so I'm not getting into the details of that. All I know is I know it when I see it. It's like pornography. I can't define it for you, but I can tell you I know it when I see it. All I know is Earl, his son, has told me he's got Alzheimer's. He's in a memory care unit. He's wearing a Wonder Guard so that if he goes out the door, an alarm goes off and alerts the staff in case he's a quote-unquote runner. He's not. I vowed to my best friend, Earl, I'm not going to let him waste away to nothing in the insane asylum. And he and I've talked a lot about it, and he said, please don't let me. And I said, I won't. And so I get him out every Saturday, every Sunday. I go pick him up, usually after golf. I'll play golf tomorrow, 10 in the morning, and then pick him up about 2:30 and spend the afternoon with him and get him outside and take him for a long walk. Hopefully it's going to be warm enough we can get outside without getting too overwhelmed. We call it senior abuse because I take him out and abuse him. Senior abuse. Put a cigar in his mouth, which he loves, light it up, take the dogs for a walk, and enjoy the day, the time with my buddy Earl. And we talk a lot. And he said to me 7 or 8 times, he said, I have no fear of dying. And I'm grateful he brought that up. He shared that because I need solace to know that he's comfortable in the space that he is. Now, Earl's long-term memory is pretty daggone good. He remembers stories from 10, 20, 30 years ago and remembers in detail. He remembers detail that I don't. More he tells me those kinds of stories, I'm like, okay, I remember that. And he's like, who has Alzheimer's? But when it comes to simple things, buckling his seatbelt, putting on his shoes, getting dressed correctly, taking a shower, what he had for dinner 10 minutes ago, he can't remember them. And as he's talking, a lot of times when he gets into a story where he's chatty and he starts talking about a specific story from years ago, it's not uncommon, doesn't happen all the time, but every 10th or 12th story, he'll start talking, he'll tell a story, and he'll get deep into it, and then he'll say, well, whatever. We've heard that before. It comes out of Joe Biden all the time. All I know is this. What I see out of my buddy Earl, I see out of Joe Biden. I'm not a clinician. I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you Joe has Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia. I don't know. I can't tell you the clinical definition of what he's got. I just know it's not right. I just know something's not right. And the man should not be president. And he certainly shouldn't run for president. And shame on the Democratic Party for covering up. Shame on his family for covering up. And shame on the country for still supporting him. I contend they knew this 4 years ago. I contend his closely tight circle have known this all along, but they've kept a really tight circle on him because of the thirst for power. And that is dangerous. That's not democracy. Democrats keep telling us it's all about threat to democracy is what Trump is. The real threat to democracy is Joe Biden, Democratic Party. I'll talk about that at the bottom of the hour. My name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff, and for Chris Crock. If you want to weigh in, you can hit me up across social media at Westside Jeff. on Facebook, on X, on Instagram. You can also dial 800-288-9227. You got an opinion? I'd like to hear your opinion. I want to hear what you think. How do you feel about what's going on in this country today? How do you feel about the state of this race? How do you feel about Joe Biden running again? How do you feel about his Vice President, Kamala Harris? How do you feel he did this week in the NATO summit? He did a press conference last night, and I was listening and watching to it, and I was like, "There's a mistake. There's a mistake." He called his Vice President Trump. He referred to Vladimir, the president of Ukraine, as Putin. He made several missteps. That's not going to get better. It's going to be worse in 3 months than it was 3 months ago. 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP is my number. It's Jeff, Westside Jeff, in for Chris Crock. I mentioned a minute ago that Lori Waffenschmidt, my news partner, is in the newsroom doing stories tonight and covering what's going on in the news. She did a story earlier about Joe Biden in Michigan. I watched that press conference. Excuse me. I watched Joe talk in Detroit, Michigan. I was watching Fox News. And they interrupted their programming during one of the shows, and they showed probably 20 minutes of Joe speaking. It wasn't just a video clip. It wasn't the media narrative. It truly was about 20 minutes of his speech. And behind Joe Biden were people in the audience, as Trump has to. They put their most faithful, loyal supporters behind him with signs. And the sign said, "Motown is Joetown." And let me tell you, I'm not a Democrat. I don't agree with policies. But Joe sounded great tonight. The man looked great. You would not know if it weren't for the debate and you watched Joe tonight, you wouldn't have thought anything was wrong. There was one here, one there, one quick slip. But you would not have picked up on it if you had not known what's going on over the last 2 weeks in this country. Joe sounded great. He looked great. He talked policies. He talked about Trump being an enemy. He talked about Democrat platform, jobs, progressivism, all that stuff. All the stuff that I don't agree with and you don't agree with. But this goes back to my buddy Earl. My buddy Earl, it's in a memory care unit. When you talk to Earl about specific stories from years ago, 10, 20 years ago, he remembers them well. He can tell those stories well because it's in his DNA. He's programmed to remember those. But when you ask Earl about buttoning a seatbelt, putting a seatbelt on, he can't do it. I contend Joe Biden is a campaigner. I contend Joe Biden, when you put him, when he's well rested, maybe drugged up, who knows, and you put him in front of an audience and teleprompter there, he looks pretty good. He looks presidential. He sounds like it. He speaks the speak. He talks the talk. He's got the narrative. He sounded great tonight. The reason Joe Biden was in Michigan, Detroit, is because there's really, as of today, right this second, there are 3 swing states that are going to make the difference between the presidential election, winner and loser. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, those 3 states. Now, when you think about Pennsylvania, I think about this. Remember, Joe's a boy from Scranton. He's going to be fighting to win Pennsylvania. If you know anything about politics, let me give you some insight there on Pennsylvania. Because Pennsylvania is so far away from us here in Texas. The eastern portion of Pennsylvania is very Democrat. In order to win Pennsylvania, they got to get out the vote, GOTV they call it, and over-deliver in Philadelphia in the eastern portion of Pennsylvania. Because the western side of Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh and some of those areas, a lot of them will be more Trump than Biden. But the eastern portion, Scranton, Erie, eastern half of Pennsylvania, they need to over-deliver to carry Joe over the threshold. Michigan is a very, very important state. Partially because of the influx of immigrants, partially because of unions, partially because of labor. And Joe was there tonight, is there tonight, and delivered a hell of a speech. It sounded great. Again, it's not my thing. It's not my policy. But I watched it. And if you didn't watch the debate, you'd look at it and go, he sounded pretty damn good. He did. But there are 3 constituencies Joe is fighting for. 3 constituencies. If he is going to be the nominee, there's 3 constituencies he's got to continue to own. He's got to over-deliver those. He's got to attack those. He's got to own those. I'll tell you what those are in about 4 minutes. If you want to weigh in, you can hit me up across social media at Westside Jeff on Facebook, on X, and on Instagram. Or just pick up a phone, dial 800-288-9227. That's 800-288-WBAP. I'd like to hear your opinion. Joe sounded great tonight in Detroit. Did you hear him? And if you did, I'd like to hear what you think. He sold his message tonight and sounded great. But this is a long-term problem. It's not going to go away. I want to hear your thoughts, your opinion on how you feeling about everything I'm talking about. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. In for Chris Crocker, News Talk 820 WBAP, and now on FM at 93.3. The name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff in for Chris Crock here on News Talk 820 WBAP. Chris was on earlier today. I'll be sitting in Monday, Tuesday night also as he covers for Casey during the day. We're talking about the biggest story that's going on in I said to Mrs. Westside Jeff 2 weeks ago, I said, honey, this is the biggest story in my lifetime since I've been doing radio for 15 years on talk radio. It truly is. It's like an onion. It's big. It's stinky. There's so many twists and turns, and the more you unpeel it, the stinkier it gets. And around every turn, this is a story that we are consumers of news. You and I, we follow the news and watch the news, read the news, stay attuned to it. And it seems like every 2 to 3 hours, there's dropping news on this story, including the latest, which I'll get into in about 10 minutes, or about 8 minutes, and that is the latest on the number of folks in the Democratic Party who had denounced Joe Biden in running for office again. Love to hear your opinion. You can hit me up across social media at Westside Jeff. You can also pick up the phone and dial 800-288-9227 like Lita. Lita, did I get that correct? The pronunciation right? Is it Lita from Grand Prairie?
Yeah. Yes, you did.
Excellent,
you.
Lita. Thank you for listening.
Okay.
What's your thought?
Okay, Westside Jeff. This is the way I truly feel in my heart. I believe that his wife, his brother, Hunter, the DOJ, the FBI, all of them should be. I want to know why they cannot be charged for treason against the citizens of America. Because we know what they did. You know, from when they left Afghanistan with the soldiers and the equipment there and opening up our borders. Where is the borders are? You mean she can't? Why isn't it treason what they have done?
You know what, Lita? Thank you for calling. Thank you for being part of the show. My answer to that is simple, and it's some really good questions. And I think if Joe loses this election, and Trump wins it, I think you're going to see Trump. If Trump wins, which I suspect as of this second he does, I think you're going to see a full sweep, not only at the presidential desk, but also both houses of Congress. Will pick up seats in the House, maybe 10 to 20, and certainly win the Senate. I'll tell you more. And I think you're going to see both houses of Congress and the president turn their attention to that because they're going to investigate it, open up some investigations. And there'll be a lot of things that come out 2 years from now that you and I will look back and go, we knew that was happening, and I'm just glad they validated it. Does that make sense?
Well, we are okay. I understand what you're saying because they got to take their time and do these things. And I'm thinking about my children, my grandchildren, and my great-grandchildren. They are trying to turn America upside down. It is already upside down. I just don't understand. I mean, you could go into Walmart and steal something and be charged. But these people have done this to us, and they can walk away free with money. And Hunter Biden dealing with Russia and China, and then they talking about Russia and China's bad. I can't figure it out.
Lita, thank you for listening. I appreciate you calling the show. Thank you very much. I figured it out, and that is that party's in control, and that party's going to stonewall everything. They're certainly not going to prosecute themselves. 800-288-9227 is the phone number. On the other side of this call, I'll tell you about the 3 constituencies Joe is serving. John from Grapevine, thanks for listening. You're on News Talk 820 WBAP.
I appreciate you taking my call. I have concerns also, but probably not the same ones you do. You named us the 3 states that I told about. We're sitting out on the patio listening to you, and you named the 3 states that I named that are absolutely essential if Trump is going to win. We have 2 boys in the military, one in the Air Force, one's a Marine. I'm not going to tell you where they're stationed or what their ranks are, but they're both officers, and what concerns me is who has control of the nuclear codes. I don't know how quickly, based on what I hear and I'm told, I don't know how quickly we could respond if a military emergency arose. And Joe is not in charge. I do not know who is setting the policy or calling the shots. I do not know. But I know that we are going to have a hell of a problem if an attack is launched against us. And I have said all along that I think that we will be challenged by China over Taiwan before the next president is inaugurated. I am very concerned.
John, thank you for listening, and enjoy your night out on the patio. I couldn't agree with you more. And to further what you just said, it was a week ago that I saw a story. The U.S. military has raised a security protection measure. It is taking at its bases throughout Europe and asking service members to be more vigilant and keep a lower profile due to the combination of threats it's seeing across the region. So they raised the threat factor to the second highest threat factor, and I couldn't agree with you more. The commander-in-chief, most important job that they have day in and day out to be aware of is what's going on with the national threats against our country. And I agree with you. That's a concern, and that came to light this week through some of the press conferences and some conversations. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that there are 3 constituencies that Joe Biden has on whether he runs or whether he doesn't run. I'll give you the details after the bottom of the hour news, but the 3 constituencies, real high level, are number 1, it's polling, and that's voters. Voter sentiment. What do the voters feel? The nervousness or support of voters. Number 1 is polling. 3 constituencies Joe Biden has on whether he pursues the office of president again as a re-election platform or he doesn't. Number 1 is polling. Number 2 are donors. When you cut off the money to a political candidate, you're cutting off their lifeline. So if donors stop donating money, that certainly is a significant player in whether you run or not. Again, we're talking about the 3 that whether you run or not for election, no matter what it is, especially office of president, you have 3 constituencies. Number 1 is polling, number 2 is donors, and number 3 is support in Capitol Hill. Those 3 constituencies. And we're starting to see all three of those impact this race. Right now, as of an hour ago, there are 19 Democrats who have come forward and asked Joe not to run for election. 18 of them are congressional members. One of them is a senator. 19 Democrats have spoken out. There were 3 that spoke out last weekend, Jerry Nadler being one of them, but after they were told to get in line, they gave their support for Joe Biden. I say shame on them. To your point, John, I couldn't agree with you more. Military preparedness is one of the key issues. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, Lori Waffen-Schmidt in the newsroom has a story about the Menendez bribery case. She'll tell you more about that in about 3 minutes. On the other side of that, I want to come back out and tell you a little more about those 3 constituencies, how they come into play, why it's important, and how it ties back to what Joe Biden did tonight in Michigan and how it all ties together. We'll talk about that in about 6 minutes. But first, in 2 minutes, you got Lori Waffen-Schmidt in the newsroom with an update on the Menendez trials, the bribery case. On the other side of that, I'll be back. We'll continue the conversation about Biden and what's going on, roll out the news as it relates today to tonight's story about Biden in Michigan. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff, and for Chris Crocker, News Talk 820, WBAP, and now on FM at 93.3. So 19 Democrats have come out and specifically asked Joe Biden not to run for re-election. 18 House members, 1 Senate member. We'll talk about that in about 2 minutes. I'll also tell you more about why the 3 constituencies that Joe Biden has and what he does, whether he continues to run through the end or he doesn't. There are 3 constituencies he has for that. Talk radio ain't one of them. I'll tell you who they are and why that impacts what's going on. That also in 2 minutes. But first, another news story hit today. Saw it this morning. AT&T came out that this morning that AT&T revealed its second data breach of the year. That was this morning they announced that. It was a leak that affects more than 100 million U.S. customers. It's their second data breach. Now, the cause of the breach was not a breakdown of the company's servers, is what they said, but rather a malicious actor, they say, a malicious actor who illegally broke into an AT&T workspace from a remote platform. Now, we know this because according to Securities Exchange Commission filings, AT&T this morning came out, they first learned about this data breach on April 19th of this year after a quote-unquote threat actor claimed to have unlawfully accessed and copied AT&T call logs. They go on and say that this threat actor gradually siphoned the data from AT&T Workspace through a third-party cloud platform between April 14th and 25th. That's May, June. Oh, that's 3 months ago, during which time the company had begun an investigation into the breach with the help of external cybersecurity experts. Now, as I read that story, as I go through and read multiple sources, it sticks out to one of those things I'm going to keep in the top of my mind and file and watch this. And this is where I like the reporting news media. I like the national media to be our watchdogs of our community because I think questions have to be asked. One question is, why do they call it threat actor? That just seems odd to me. They come up with a term and identify this as a threat actor. Something tells me they know more than they do that they've told us. It may not be good. It may have political ramifications. It may not. I don't know. But it just seems like somebody's not telling us the whole story, and it's worse than what they've reported. I want to keep my eye on that. You need to also. And the only way we know this is because of a filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is part of things that they have to do, the filings, because they're a publicly held company. So keep your eye on that. That's the AT&T data breach. Find it interesting. It also came out on a Friday. You've heard me talk many times. My name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff, sitting in for Chris Crock. I've talked about the Friday afternoon news dump. In this case, Friday morning news dump. You want to break bad news, you do it on a Friday because it becomes less of a story as people are going into a weekend, especially middle of summer, which is a key summer vacation time period, and the holiday right after July 4th. So that has my tentacles up going, is there more to this story or is that really it? I also don't always believe what I just been in the corporate world long enough to know this looks like it's being undersold. Keep your eye on it. We'll continue to have that conversation as time goes. Westside Jeff in for Chris Crock. I want to talk about Biden in Michigan tonight. 19 members of the Democratic Party have asked Joe Biden not to run. They've asked him to step aside in the 2024 race. Growing number of Democratic lawmakers continue to have those conversations. This week on Capitol Hill, they've been weighing arguments about whether Biden should run or not run. Should he be the nominee? Should he not? So far, 18 House Democrats and 1 Senate Democrat have directly called on the president to exit the race. The very first Democrat to do that was a House member, Lloyd Doggett, here in Texas. Lloyd represents the Austin area. He came out on July 2nd, I think it was, right around July 4th, and said the president should not run, and he's been very vocal about it. I appreciate Lloyd Doggett speaking up, even though it goes against his party. So this is one of those constituencies I've talked about. There are 3 constituencies that the president of the United States has on whether he runs and goes through the end or he doesn't. Number 1 is polling. Not in this order, not prioritized 1, 2, and 3, but there are 3 constituencies. One of them is polling. And on the heels of what happened in the debate, you're seeing polling. In fact, behind the scenes, the Team Obama, Team Clinton, and the Democratic leads, those in charge of the party, are doing private polling because they want to keep their finger on the pulse. They want to know what's going on. They know what's going on. And they want to see if Joe Biden getting out and doing the George Stephanopoulos interview turns things around. They want to see if Joe Biden getting on Morning Joe this week on MSNBC turns things around within their base. They want to see if Joe Biden in Michigan tonight turns things around. They have real-time data more quickly than you and I have. They're monitoring it and watching it to see, do any of these things that Joe Biden is doing, do any of these talking points, do any of these Democratic lawmakers coming out and speaking on his behalf. This morning, James Clyburn from South Carolina, who dragged Joe into office, by the way, 4 years ago, very influential guy in the Black Caucus, representative out of South Carolina. He's part of the reason we have Joe Biden in the first place. He was on the Today Show, and he specifically spoke about he said it once, I'm riding for Biden. But he was very adamant supporting Joe Biden. He was asked if Joe Biden stepped aside, would he endorse Kamala Harris? Now, Craig Melvin of NBC's Today Show asked the questions. Craig Melvin was pretty smart in asking that question. He, in essence, said, if Joe does step aside, would you support Kamala Harris? He knew he'd get a reaction from James Clyburn on that. Clyburn took a hook, line, sinker and said, heck yes. She's ready. Now, under normal circumstances, somebody else in the Democratic Party, and that was an opening, would have said, it's a hypothetical and it's not going to happen. Joe Biden's the guy. But Clyburn didn't bite. Clyburn didn't do that. He propped up Kamala Harris. So the three constituencies that Joe Biden has to running for re-election, one of them is polling, so that's what they're doing. They're watching that. A second one is donors. You can't run for office without a boatload of money. Part of the reason Joe's in Michigan tonight is fundraising, but it's also polling, and it's also about down ticket stuff. And that's the third constituency. The third constituency for Joe Biden staying in the race, not staying in the race, is support in Capitol Hill. That's House of Representative members. It's U.S. Senate races. It's the governors. It's local leaders. He needs the support of Democrats down the ticket. Down ticket balloting, down ticket races are very, very important. And if those, remember, every member of Congress, every House of Representative member is up for re-election this year. There's also a lot of Senate races up, which I'll tell you about. I get hit bottom of the hour news on the other side of the news. I'll tell you more about it and why that's so important, and it's key. It's critical to this race. It's critical to what's going to go on. It's everything because it impacts everything. Actually, top of the hour news coming up. On the other side, I got to hit a break on the other side of this. I'll continue that conversation about the Senate because the Senate is big. It's key. Again, three constituencies that Joe Biden has to stay in the race that he's got to win those three constituencies over. Polling, donors, and Capitol Hill. I'll tell you why the Capitol Hill element is important. It plays out tonight in Michigan. You'll see examples of it in Michigan. You'll continue to see examples of it when he visits Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, the other two key states. But on your news tonight and on the news you see tomorrow morning, they'll talk about this. I'll tell you what it is in about 3.5, 4 minutes. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff, and for Chris Crocker, News Talk 820 WBAP. The name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff sitting in for Chris Crock. Chris is filled in today, also on Monday, Tuesday for Casey Bartholomew, and I'll be sitting in this chair for Chris on Monday and Tuesday too. We're talking about the big story, and that is Joe Biden. The case of what's going on seems to be like an ugly onion. Every peel of that onion, there's a new layer, and that layer is a story, and the story changes every 2 to 3 hours. So advancing the story, Joe Biden was in Michigan tonight. I'll tell you more about that in 3 minutes. If you want to interact with this, with the show, with the content, I'd love to hear your perspective on Biden. Can he win? Can he not win? What does he do? Does he drop? Does he not? Does he run? I don't think he's the guy on November 5th. I don't think he makes it all the way to the end. My politicos disagree with me, but I think the pressure is mounting to the point that they can't force him out, but they certainly can push hard enough to, in essence, force him out. There's a lot of constituencies. We'll talk about that in about 3 minutes also. So I don't think he's going to last. I think they can get rid of him. And I've heard all the chatter about maybe an insider, maybe a leak, maybe a secret email, something like that. Listen, there's a lot of folks that know a lot about Joe Biden. If they really want to get rid of him, somebody could speak and they could damn him down. 800-288-9227 is the phone number. You can connect with me across social media at Westside Jeff. That's on X, formerly known Twitter. It's on Instagram, on Facebook. Just pick up the phone, dial 800-288-9227 like Greg in Southlake. Greg, thanks for listening to the Chris Crock Show. I'm Westside Jeff sitting in. What's your thoughts on this story tonight?
Hey, Westside. Joe isn't going to give up unless he dies or he gets an overdose of the psychomeds they pop him up on every once in a while. But the real reason Joe... I got to borrow a typo from President Trump and two verbal gaffes from Biden and George W. Bush, okay? The reason Joe is not going to win is he doesn't have the cavete. And to put it into Biden speak, Trump has the goodest cavete strategery out there. Joe just doesn't have the cavete. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you.
You remember the big Caveffe Twitter typo from President Trump back in the day, right?
I remember the concept, yes. Basically, it meant it. Doesn't have the it factor.
He doesn't have it. He just doesn't have it. And you know, to Caveffe must flow. You know, that's just what it is. So, you know, Joe's going to stick it out. He's going to fight all the opposition. He's going to burn. He's going to watch the world burn, the Democrat world burn. He's going to just keep it up, and his little minions around him. You know, I mean, maybe, you know, I don't know. Maybe if Joe croaked or Biden or Hunter, relapsed and had a mixed drug intoxication fatal event. You know, that might get Joe to stop. But other than, you know, they just got the corpse propped up, and they're going to keep pushing it out there through November 5th, and then he's going to lose.
Greg, thanks for listening. I appreciate your calling, and thanks for being a part of the show tonight. I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. I don't agree with it. I still think Joe's not going to be the guy. They can't force. They can't make him. They can't usurp him and say you're not going to be the guy. This is going to be the guy, or whatever. But they certainly can apply the pressure to push him out, so he makes a good decision. And the other thing I'd say to what you said about Trump winning in November, yes, he can. This situation scares me because the Democrats can actually win. They can win. And I'll tell you more about that in about 12 minutes after top of the hour news. I'll tell you how they can win. I'm not underestimating the Democrats. I'm not passing it past the Democrats. And that's what angers me about listening to Fox News and some talk radio. People say it's over. Well, it's not over. I'm not willing to sit here and wait till November 15th and look back and say, great, Trump win, or I'm not willing to accept the fact that Biden won and sit back and go, what happened? I did that 4 years ago. I'm not going to do that again. I can tell you the Democrats are going to pull out every stop and they're going to try to win. And as much as they're a mess today, and they are, this could unite them. It also could keep them very divided and make for a mess and Trump win. But I'm telling you, I'm not underestimating the Democratic Party at this point. I'll tell you, I'll sell it to you a little bit on the other side of the top of the hour news on how they can win. I'm not predicting it. I'm just telling you, don't take your eye off the ball. Don't think this is over. Don't think it's an easy cakewalk. And I'll leave you with this little tidbit that I'll cover after top of the hour. As bad of a candidate as Joe Biden is, as infirmity as he is, as sick as he is, as out of it as he is, why isn't this race over? I'll pose that question to you. If this is such a horrible candidate, if it's all over and done, wrapped up, gone, Under these conditions, if the Republican Party had a really, really good candidate, I'm here to tell you the polling right now would show 70-30 in front of the Republican candidate. If we had a 45-year-old Ronald Reagan up against Joe Biden, this thing would be over. Polling would be 75-25 right now. It ain't even close to that. I stay on top of polls. You look at an average of polls. If it's Biden versus Trump, on average, Trump's up 1 or 2 points. But when you throw in the other guys, the Green Party and Kennedy and so on, it's more Biden or more Trump up 6 points. But I've seen polling that shows Biden is winning. As stupid as it sounds, hard to believe. My question to you is, if he's that bad of a candidate, then why isn't he up 75-25 right now? It's not even close. You can't find me a poll like that. I want to hear your opinion. 800-288-9227. 800-288-WBAP. Again, if Biden is that bad, and he is, if his policies suck, and they do, if he's that damaged medically, and he is, you ever ask yourself, why haven't you ever seen a poll that shows Trump in the lead 75-25? I'll tell you why on the other side of the news.